Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Eugenio Pace. I work in Microsoft in the platform architecture team with my friend Gianpaolo. So for those of you who have been in the session number 1 of this symposium, that was pretty much about the motivations of why cloud, some of the liabilities, pros and cons, all of the flexibility that we have with these all new tools. In this session, we're going to switch gears a little bit, and we're going to focus specifically on the attributes that or the specific attributes that make adoption of cloud services in the enterprise kind of interesting, right? So we're going to focus especially in that, in the relationship between and the adoption blockers that we believe need to be addressed if we want to see kind of widespread adoption of services in this segment. So there's no doubt that services for consumers, services for small and medium businesses, it's something that it's already happened. Nobody has any doubts about that. So for that, I want to first start defining what we mean by enterprise. And we have this very big corp, which of course is a fictitious company. It's a massive enterprise, right? It's a company, a multinational company, billions of dollars in revenue. They're all everywhere in the world, thousands of employees. They have very complex hierarchical organizations. And therefore, of course, IT in this place, it's also complex. And it's usually a very and highly regulated environment. You don't just go there and install stuff on the data center. There is prescriptive guidance. The development environments are highly controlled. There is naming conventions. When you hire a new developer in very big corp, you give this huge manual on how we code in this place, right? You have to follow all those rules. And this complexity or this regulated environment is not there just because we like bureaucracy, right? It is there for good reasons, even though sometimes we wished all of those things were not there. And the reasons it is there is, well, because it's a very complex place. There's layers and layers of software and products. There's different networking protocols. There's a history that goes back years ago. And all of that has to be working together. And it's actually, sometimes it's almost a miracle that all those things stitched together work. So there are good reasons for that. Services, services in very big corp, get, for the first time, usually in the black market of IT. So what typically happens, of what we've seen, is that somebody from a business unit, say, a VP of marketing, learns about some service out there that seems to be very good for their business and has a feature set that they like, and then, buys it. It's very simple. Just a credit card, go there, buy a subscription, and voila, it happens. So it might be used for a handful of employees in the marketing department initially, and it's, all is good. The problem is that, at this stage, Issue Tracker, which is a service that we will be using as an example throughout the session, it's kind of like an illegal immigrant in big IT. It's there, it does something, and there's some people want to get rid of that. Not everybody knows it exists, but it's in a kind of a limbo. And things get even more complicated when the VP says, well, this is great. We've been using Issue Tracker for a while. It's exactly what we needed for our business. It does what we need. And instead of just the 10 of us using it, we want to roll out this to my whole division. And that might be 1,500 users or 10,000 users. And that's when this little thing, Issue Tracker, gets into a different exposure. And that's when real things start to happen. So let's imagine that at this point the VP of marketing goes and calls the CIO of the company and says, hey, we've been using this system for some time, and now we want to roll out for the 10,000, 1,500 users in my whole business unit. On the other side, we have super cloud software that was introduced by GP. And this is ASV. John, let's say, is the CEO and founder of super cloud software. He embraced all of the web from the very beginning. He's built a system for many, targeting the small and medium businesses, maybe consumers, but they have some of the characteristics that are a contrast with very big corp, right? So things like fast innovation. Every time they're thinking about new features that are mainly driven by their customer base, and because it's a service, deployments are easier. They just, push all those updates into the service, and it's all good. And then one day, they realize very big corp is using their service. It's still small. It's just 10 guys somewhere. But it's very big corp. It's not, it's not a small thing. And not even that, sometime later on, they get a call from the CIO of very big corp saying that, hey, we want to roll out issue tracker everywhere in the marketing department. Or at least we want to talk about that, right? So, of course, John is very happy. He's thinking about IPO. He's thinking about his investors and all of that. And he goes to the meeting. And the meeting with the CIO goes more or less something like this. They say, hey, John, we love your software, right? We love your service. Our internal customers are, all like raving fans of what you've done. And it's great. We haven't seen that very often. Now, there's a few things that I want to discuss with you, right? There's a few details of your service that, when we want to adopt it massively, need to be addressed. And so, first of all, it's 10,000 users, right? We're not going to have 10,000 username and passwords all around for many reasons. One, it's, of course, the user. We don't want them to deal with it. But more importantly, maybe he doesn't say that, but more importantly is I don't want my help desk to be overwhelmed with calls that, people forget the password, having to reset them and all of that, deal with all of that. So we need to somehow address this issue and have single sign-on between one and the other. Of course, it's John. He wants to say, I say, sure, of course, why not? Now, what he thinks is a little bit different. Now, second, Issue Tracker, which is this quality control system to keep track of issues, says, hey, we also have another system that we built that it's based on a mainframe. It's an AS400. And we don't want these guys to be typing once and again from one or the other. Duplicate data entry is no good. So we need to somehow coordinate these two systems so they talk to each other. So when somebody does something on Issue Tracker, that goes back to our AS400. And if somebody does something in the AS400, it goes back to Issue Tracker. Sure. Finally, the last thing I want to discuss with you, John, is that when something goes wrong, we need to know. And obviously, 404 or something like 500 on a screen, that's not a good idea. Also, we already have some processes in place. And we don't want the 10,000 employees to retrain them to say, hey, every time Issue Tracker doesn't work, call John. Because that will not fly. So we already have all this in place. They know what to do. When something goes wrong, calls our help desk. And so we need to, in a way, tie these two things together, your help desk with our help desk. So we are proactively can do something about the app, right? So in the CIO's mind, there's actually one main theme, and that's actually the main theme of this session, which is there's a need for integration. That's the main technical obstacle that was described in the previous session by GP of why things are difficult to move outside of the boundaries of a company like Very Big Corp. And that's integration in three different aspects, which is reflected in the dialogue. Integration of security aspects, authentication and authorization, integration of the application itself, so functional integration, so data can flow from one place to the other, and then the operational integration. Now, there's many other obstacles, right? These are the technical obstacles. We know, and that's in all our discussions with people like you, we know that there's many other obstacles which have nothing to do with technology. It has to do with trust, right, or geopolitical issues, or regulations, or laws, and stuff like that. Well, that's something that we will not be covering in this particular presentation. in a way, I don't think that's we need to just dismiss those obstacles. Those are very, very important and need to be addressed as well. But in a way, these technical aspects and these technical challenges are like necessary conditions, right? Not sufficient, but they are necessary. If you don't have these, then the conversation with the CIO reflects kind of what will happen, which is somebody will dismiss your solution altogether. So, just a quick word on Issue Tracker. So Issue Tracker that's a flawed animation anyway, but Issue Tracker it's a cloud service, right? It's not really available as an on-premise system. It's only available on the cloud. Now, it is offered as a cloud application itself, but internally, it makes use of other building blocks which are themselves offered as building blocks on the cloud, right? So Issue Tracker has been built to use SQL data services as a persistent store, and we also use some other services like the ones described there. Now, again, we will not be covering the guts of Issue Tracker. That's not something that we are interested in this case. What we are interested is in what happens in the border, right, in the surface of Issue Tracker, in consideration what happens with a company like Very Big Corp. Okay? So let's jump now into the first challenge, which is around security integration. Now, what Issue Tracker has done, or what SuperCloud software did with Issue Tracker is pretty much this, which is what 95% of services do out there, which is give you a username and password, right? And that has some problems in the context of a company. Because if you think about it, if we ask somebody in a company like Joe at Very Big Corp or anybody there to use a username and password, we're essentially asking to logically become part, from a security perspective, of SuperCloud software, right? It's like he's in there, really. It has nothing to do with whatever Very Big Corp has deployed. And that has a lot of implications. So one implication, of course, is that I forget, I have many of these and stuff like that. But there's other implications that have to do with things like life cycle management. So imagine that I hire a new guy in Very Big Corp. Then I need to add into the procedures that every time I add somebody and hire somebody that has to use Issue Tracker, then I need to go to Issue Tracker and have a new username and password for that guy. But imagine that something, that might be okay, a burden on management. But think about Joe is fired from Very Big Corp. Now, the thing that most companies protect themselves, by physical access. So if I cannot get into a Very Big Corp's building, then I don't have access to a machine, and then I cannot do anything there, right? Even if within the boundaries of Very Big Corp, I have multiple username and passwords. That's not the point. But if I fire Joe, and I'm using Issue Tracker, and I use username and password from Issue Tracker, he goes home not very happy, and he still can't get into the system and do something creative with the data there, right? So that's clearly a big problem. Some people have implemented ways of dealing with this thing, like synchronizing directories or stuff like that. We will see why that's a problem. So if companies like SuperCloud software, the service provider, ask their customers to do something special for them, then we have primarily, besides all of the lifecycle issues that I mentioned in the example, we have also a scalability issue, right? Because they have to do something special for each service that they acquire. And hopefully there will be many. In a company with thousands of apps, there's a big chance that some of those will be pushed out to the cloud. So that clearly doesn't scale. Now, you can think that John, in his desperation for having Very Big as a customer, he will say, well, let's do something. Doesn't work. Maybe it works with us, and so let's adjust it. Let's do something. Well, if they do that, which is okay, it might solve Very Big Corp issue, we still have the problem that it doesn't scale on the other side, right? Because then for each customer that they want to sell, Very Big Corp must another subsidiary, whatever, they have to do something special as well. So the way of solving this, it's nothing very fairly new. It's the same core principles that we've been applying to other problems, which is decoupling, encapsulation, and trying to have different separation of concerns of those things. And the solution in this case is to create some kind of intermediary between the two parties, the consumer and the provider, so you can have like domains of management. So one side, what we want is the service provider to have a knob to define what are the things that he wants to protect, what are the things that deserve some kind of permission on their app. On the other side, what we want is to give all these consumers of the service, the companies, very big corp, massive enterprise, etc., the ability to control who they hire, who they fire, who they give access to, independently of number one. And so we need the third element, this intermediary, to manage that relationship. So we have a system that has these three knobs. Having access to any particular feature is then a combination of three dimensions, right? Okay? Look at that. Now I'm stereo. Right. This architecture, the basic design of what I described, is actually very, very common. It's kind of interesting from a technical perspective, but we use this every single day. And this is what we do here in PDC. So when you come to PDC, you show your passport, your driving license. I show my badge at Microsoft. I go to registration, and registration gives me a badge, this, right? And there's actually different badges. There is the yellow badge for speakers and others, crew, staff, etc. Then there's resources that PDC makes available to all of us. Right, we have operations, the guys, behind the scenes, making sure that everything is working, including the microphones. The speaker room, that's for us to practice, and I've been there quite some time in this week. The PD sessions themselves, the party, Universal Studio, all of that. Now, that's exactly how the system works. People in the entrance of the rooms, or in the speaker room, Universal Studio, if you show the passport, they will laugh at you and say, sure, nice passport, nice, eagle on there. But we want the yellow thingy. If you don't bring the yellow thingy, we don't let you through. This system makes it very scalable, because the rules that you need to apply in each of these, we don't care how you get your passport. Well, as long as it's a legal passport, right? But we have these three levels of control that we can tweak and we can scale very much. So technically, this is identity federation and claim-based authorization, right? So there is the service issue tracker by SuperCloud software that has some policies that define what is protected and what's needed to unlock those resources. And they only care about their own thing. So these are the rules, say, of the guys controlling the entrance into the, sorry, let me back up, the entrance into PDC. They have that rule, say, green, yellow, etc. from PDC. That's all I care. Now, then we have the intermediary, which is kind of the registration place where you say, well, give me something that somebody else will understand. And then, of course, we have very big corp with its own policies. Who gets access to the service? Only project managers, only VPs, Eugenio at Microsoft, whatever. Whatever those rules are, those are on the company. And the way the system works is actually very simple, and it's the same thing we do in PDC. So if very big corp, Joe, say a very big corp, wants to interact with issue tracker, first it goes to the intermediary with something that is the passport equivalent. And that's something that can be verified by the intermediary. They look at that and say, oh, you are Joe, for example, or you are a VP. Then it applies its rules There might be some conversions and say, oh, if you're a VP, then I can give you this in exchange. That issue tracker will understand. And that's the pentagon, the yellow pentagon over there, which is equivalent of this badge. And then with that badge, I go and do whatever I want. Maybe issue tracker will reject me, maybe it will not, and I will have access with the rules that issue tracker applies there. Okay, fairly simple. Now, until now, we built a couple of these systems in the past. There was a sample app that our team created, just showing some of the other challenges of building software delivered as a service, and we implemented actually something like this without the tools and without the services that are available to you today. Things like the Geneva framework, things like access control on the cloud, things like that were not there. So we had to kind of go deep into the details of X09 certificate, X509 certificates, and dealing with a lot of, a ton of very complex APIs to deal with these things, right? And so the good news today is that all of that is now being pushed into the platform where it's being taken care of, and you don't have to deal with all those details yourself. So that's very good news. So with that, I'm going to jump into my first demo, which is precisely seeing all this in action. Now, I was going to have a disclaimer that, all this is beta, yada, yada, but I'm so dependent on the network that things might fail. That's what I'm saying. Let me start then with showing you, let's see, over here. So the intermediary in our sample, in this demo, is built with access control, right? With a service that now it's part of our cloud services, right? And that's a decision that we made. Now, if we go there and we peek into how it's configured at this point, we will see that issue tracker has, or better said, SuperCloud software has has already one customer there. So I go to the service, and we will see that it has these rules that will apply for, in this case, for a company called Massive Enterprise, right? So you see that anyone with a PM, which is here, signed by Massive Enterprise, it will issue something else, translate that into Massive Enterprise get projects. And that's all it is. So there is only rules for a company named Massive Enterprise, which is another company like Very Big Corp that we will be using. So the first thing I want to do is bootstrapping this, because obviously all this works once you have all those rules in place. If you don't have those rules, well, you cannot do anything. So I'm going to play the role of somebody in Very Big Corp that for the first time is bootstrapping this, defining the initial rules, and see how it goes. So what you see here is the provisioning website that Issue Tracker built for companies like Very Big Corp. So there's some prerequisites that I need to comply with. These are things like, what are the things that are needed for provisioning? And let's go forward. For bootstrapping, there's a one-time ticket that Issue Tracker gives Very Big Corp, and also prevents any of you there to mess with my demo. And then there's information that needs to be acquired from Very Big Corp so this relationship can be set up, right? So things like who are you, where is the URL of your STS, which is a technical element that will validate your initial credentials, like those are the source of the equivalent of your passport, your driving license, etc. They need a certificate as well, so I'm going to upload here Very Big Corp public keys, so then the intermediary can verify that what you're actually sending is from Very Big Corp and it's not from somebody else. So I do that. Then I will capture some other information, who you are, demographics, etc., logo. I have a nice logo here of Very Big Corp, and an active STS. That's a technical detail that we will discuss in a second. Finally, when we're done, and the last step is to define the bootstrap relationships, the rules between the things that a very big corp can deal with and the things that issue tracker deals with, right? That's the first separation. In our demo, we are using as input claims, right, as things that a company can send with confidence group membership. And that's just a convenience, right? So that we think that it's a very simple thing to associate permissions with. That's something that companies are very used to. You can say all PMs, all members of this group in Active Directory have access to such a thing. So as an issue tracker admin now, I want to add the project managers group that is in my directory. And then I can have access permissions in issue tracker for this group. I can say, well, project managers will be able to create projects, to list projects, but not list issues, for example, right? And I will not give him any attributes, any permissions on the management of issue tracker itself. And they will not be able to create issues. That's for, say, testers. Bear with me with example. So with that, I'm going to add those set of rules. So now you read, let me show you here. Project managers can create new projects, can list all projects. Okay? Let's create a new one as well. Let's say project testers. And project testers can say list issues, list projects, but not create projects. And of course, they can create new issues. Okay? So I will add those set of rules as well. So anyone that belongs to the project testers group in Very Big Corp will, with that claim from Very Big Corp that can be verified with the certificate that we uploaded before, then can perform this set of operations. List projects, list issues, and create new issues. Let's confirm it. I told you. All right, let's try again. Maybe not. Okay. Very nice. Let me do this. Very Big Corp. Logo. Just these two for now. Oh, I have all of those there still. Come on. Okay, let's try. Corp. Certificate again. This one. Project managers. All right, too bad. Okay, let's see if it happened anyway. Maybe it happened anyway, even if we didn't see the confirmation. It didn't happen. Let me try to do something here to circumvent this. Obviously, this control panel that we see from Issue Tracker is just a facade on top of access control, right? What we're seeing here is the backend of that. Very Big Corp should never see this because all of that is done on behalf of, right? But what you can do here, I can do that manually. I was trying to avoid this, but I can say, group project managers from Very Big Corp, I think it is, can do, let me do something else. Let me just copy one of here. Okay, so we'll skip Very Big Corp. We will do it with Massive Enterprise, which is already provisioned for me, right? So I go to you see there in the map, when I finish provisioning, what you should have seen here is a list of the additional rules that Very Big Corp created, right, and the mapping. It's essentially the same. We have two companies here, Massive Enterprise instead. So now I'm going to jump into the into Massive Enterprise. And see how things are defined. All right. Just bear with me a second. Let me do one check here. All right. So you know what? I'm going to do something else. I'm going to do something else. I'm going to call the cavalry. I'm going to wait for that. So, and let's see the three knobs, right? This is Very Big Corp's Active Directory. And here is where Very Big Corp can define, who is member of what. And now, I have what should have happened is that the project managers group, I would add people here, and then I will, based on that claim is transmitted to access control, that is translated into the claims that issue tracker understands, and then I will have access based on that. So then if I added there Frank, and then I logged in as, let's say, Frank, great, the cavalry is coming. So now that nothing is defined, so this should fail completely, right? Come on. So get all the issues. There's nothing. I'm not bringing anything into access control, so I don't even have a way of translating any token. This hasn't even reached issue tracker yet. It's caught at the translation point, right? But it's like going to the registration booth and not showing anything, or showing something that access control cannot verify. So I don't have anything in return, right? So now, if I added, let's say that provisioning is done and we have the rule. Now, if I go back to the directory. Let's add Frank there. Project managers. All right. So now Frank is a member of project managers. I'm simulating like, say hiring Frank for the first time. Then I go back. Should be able to go back to Frank's workstation, run the application again, and if provisioning was done, well, I should have been able to see the operations that I have attached those rules to. Okay? So we built two clients for issue tracker. There is a website and there is a smart client. So what you see here is a smart client. It's a Windows Forms application that it's interacting with issue tracker web services, protected with WS Trust. That's the protocol that it's happening underneath, right? All this exchange of tokens is happening through those bindings, those specific bindings, right? Now, the thing is that traditionally federation, identity federation and claims work a little bit different if your client is a website or if your client is a smart client, because a smart client can do all that negotiation for you. So we have the two experiences, and they're implemented in similar ways. So let me go back here. Excellent. So project manager can do anything. Let's try again. It's a cavalry. There you go. So now I can get all issues. Why? If I go back to, say, my control panel here to the rules, then you see those rules were added. Now there's a project manager, a very big corp, that can do, say, anything. That's the, let me show you here, that's the star over there. Now if I remove the claim, it's there, but it's deactivated. Now I should be able to go back to the lab and I say, oh no, sorry. And I do get all projects. Well, I'm not sure I deactivated it. Anyway, you get the idea. So now I can do anything. But the important thing, there is 3 layers of control. There is the things that are defined in the enterprise, like the group membership, the things that are defined in the rules in the intermediary, and the things that issue tracker can define. Now, with this, let me show you very quickly what the STS looks like, right? Because the way this thing works is that Frank, when he logs into the company, into the workstation that it's part of the domain, his identity is already known. It's known because it's part of the pretty big corp domain. But then when we go to issue tracker, they say, no, you need to go to the intermediary, and the intermediary sends him to the STS that we configured at provisioning. And this is the STS we built with the Geneva framework, right? And the simple thing that we are doing is we are grabbing his identity using Windows integrated security, and then what we're doing is getting all his groups. Where are the groups? It's a very straightforward, the simplest STS that we could build. In the real world, you would replace most probably this custom-built STS that we built with the Geneva framework with something like the Geneva server, because it will allow you to do more complex things on the company side to define more complex rules. Maybe you don't want to use groups as part of the as input claims, right? You might want to use something else, or you might want to do some things like not disclose the internal groups of your company and use some external representation of that. Nobody really cares, because the claims that you send outside are just known and meaningful for you, right? And you can say PMs equivalent to 1, project testers equivalent to 2, super project managers equivalent to 3. And all the rules access control will see is 1, 2, 3, and issue tracker, of course, doesn't care about that, because it will be just the create issue, get all issues, which are the claims that they understand. Make sense? Now, in terms of complexity, building this without the Geneva framework is actually far more complex than this handful of line of codes, right? Far, far more complex. Okay, so let me go back here now, just recap a little bit. So the first thing was the actual interaction of this. Second thing is the products that we're using, both for creating the public STS of the company and for securing the website and the web service. We're using the Microsoft Geneva framework. And we're using the access control for that. Now, one thing that we try to implement here with the provisioning that you saw is that, again, very big corp doesn't know anything about access control. For all its purposes, it's all issue tracker. So this is one example of an ISV using a cloud service as an infrastructure piece, that it's not being exposed to its consumers, right? There's not even a need for doing this, right? It's not the only way you can solve this problem. Issue tracker can be protected with an STS that you can build yourself using the same framework. So in the same way that we built an STS custom based on the Geneva framework for very big corp, you can build your own STS with all the rules transformation and all those things that we built in access control. So if you didn't want to rely on Microsoft Access Control Service to do that, you can still build it with the framework. So the message here is kind of the freedom of choice that we're giving you in terms of how you address this. We give you a server, which is the Geneva server. We're giving you a framework which is a Geneva framework, and we're giving you a service that you can use. If those features are not enough, you can build your own. Okay? There was a lot of focus on security in this PDC. So there's a few, I don't remember all of the sessions that cover access control, identity, and so on and so forth, but you just need to keep track of a few names. Justin Smith, Sorquan, Caleb, and Vittorio's session. All of those will allow you to go very, very deep into what's happening really under the hood of all the framework, of the Geneva and access control, right? And of course, all of these is being recorded, so you can have access anytime. Okay, so let's jump now into the second aspect, which is management integration, right? And as GP showed in his previous session, in our previous session, this is what you typically get today from a lot of services. You get this website, this dashboard that gives you some, insights. I think I have this live into, what's happening there, right? But there's a bunch of problems with this approach. First of all, it's there. It's an interesting website. It's good that the information is there actually, but the very first problem is that this doesn't talk anything about what my slice of the service looks like. It's just an aggregated, dashboard of everyone using the service. And yes, I can go and see what's happening in the past, in the future. There's a problem there, etc. This is very, very good. But, kind of the state of the art is like this. There is a portal of some kind, and then people like Don at Very Big Corp is expected to go and open that dashboard and see what's going on. And as GP mentioned, yes, you can go and screen scrap this portal and look for different things and then figure out and automate when things are going up or down. Although you will still not solve the problem of what's happening with your own use of that particular service, right? The other problem is, of course, that of scalability. If you have 50 systems or 50 services, 100 services, you would have to do this with each portal that people will give you. And that, of course, is not very good. So what we mean by real management integration is to kind of have the two, a much more broad view of options. First of all, we want the read. The read is fine, getting a view of that. We want also the write. The write operations, being able to trigger actions on the service based on your needs. So imagine, as I said before, triggering a backup, dialing the capacity or the amount of resources that you're buying from Issue Tracker based on your seasonal needs, things like that. Imagine certain weeks of the year are important for Very Big Corp. You can tune the amount of resources that you buy dynamically. Now, being able to troubleshoot the system. If something goes wrong, I want to know, but for me. And that's the second part of this slide, which is I'm interested in only in my instance of the app in a multi-tenant environment. I want to do it from following the processes and following the tools that as a company I'm already used to and I have invested on. I already have System Center, I might have Tivoli, I might have some other things that I already use. Why do I need to retrain people into something else? Right, so from all purposes, what Very Big Corp wants is to see any of these cloud services as if it were on premises. Right? That's the goal, the ultimate goal. They want to see it together with the AS400, together with the database they have, and integrate that seamlessly into that environment. Why treat cloud services differently? So my second demo, my second set of demos, is actually doing that. So let me go back to my lab. And now go and jump to Massive Enterprise. And let's go here. This is a management workstation inside Massive Enterprise. There we go. So what Issue Tracker did first was to enable me to download tools and a few other things that I can get from for my particular view of the service. So you see in the URL up there that maybe you see there that I go to issue tracker, super cloudy, blah, 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 massive enterprise. I'm not talking about somebody else. And I can download stuff, a set of tools that we will see that will allow me to interact with Issue Tracker from a management perspective. And I already downloaded that and installed that in this machine. The first thing I'm going to show you, so I can close this. So there's three things that I can download from Issue Tracker. So the first thing, it's a management console snapping, an extension to the management console that allows me to operate and get information, management information from Issue Tracker for Massive Enterprise. So that's what I'm showing right now. That's the Issue Tracker management snapping for Massive Enterprise. Notice that I don't see anything for other companies, of course. I'm as a Massive Enterprise, I'm not seeing anything from a very big corp. So the two things that allow me to do is dealing with events that we will show later on, and manage the claims from this console. I don't need to go back to the website or a specific portal that Issue Tracker creates. It's just in an environment that as an IT administrator I'm familiar with. So I open this in the management console, and I can deal with PMs. What can PMs do in my team, in my company? All right, let me try again. So this is, of course, happening real. This is actually going to the service, which is hosted somewhere. So if I query this for, say, again, PMs, what I should see is a very similar screen that we see in the provisioning side, where you have the list of actions that I can do associated with this particular group, which I can right now. Okay, let's try. Okay. Let me try it from a different workstation with the same thing. So again, the management console. There it is. Now, I can do from here things that I cannot do on a website. Now, this is running on Massive Enterprise workstation, in an IT department in Massive Enterprise. So if I want to add a new group, remember that in provisioning I had to remember what's the name of the group. Here, I can query, I can query Active Directory for my groups, so I can have a tight integration with my assets. Come on. Oh, here it is. There it is. So, that's a view, the standard dialog for Active Directory. You can say, Mary, or another group or whatever. That's a query against the Active Directory. All right. Okay. Let's see if this works. Yes, good. So now, PMs can do nothing there in this particular mapping, right? Or they can do certain things at project level. So, for project 1, anyway, some of it worked, at least. Right, but it's a familiar environment. It's not an alien, it's not a custom website. It's a management console, which is a standard piece of IT management pretty much everywhere. So the second thing that I wanted to show, hopefully, and let me go back to the IT Pro management stuff. It's a management pack, right? So Issue Tracker creates for each of its tenants a specialized and customized management pack for System Center that they can use to monitor the service right into the tools that they are familiar with. So you see, this is a System Center Operations Manager, and you see there on the tree, there is one node that says Issue Tracker. Obviously, Issue Tracker is not running on Massive Enterprise. It is running on the cloud. So, but I can see things that are important for me as Massive Enterprise. Right? I can see that, say, create issue and get all issues, which are two operations that matter in Issue Tracker from my perspective. I can go and check, what's the performance of it, and I can graph that real time. What this is happening, so System Center is going through a set of management APIs, pulling that information real time from Issue Tracker Management API. Okay? And I can also do things like, act on the app, not just read information from Issue Tracker. I can also act on Issue Tracker to do certain things. For example, I can disable Issue Tracker. I can say, for the next, 2 hours, we're going to do data migration between our ACE400 and Issue Tracker. We don't want anybody to change data there, right? So what I'm doing, and let me just change the value here and say, from System Center, say back soon. Oh, come on. And run the task. So what this is doing is I am issuing a disable command on Issue Tracker for all functional purposes. So now, nobody will be able to create new issues or get new issues or change anything in Issue Tracker within Massive Enterprise. Obviously, all of this is specific to this particular tenant, which is Massive Enterprise. Let's wait for this to run. Okay, it's done. So now, if you're lucky, and go back to Mary and try to do something with the system, let's say get all issues. There it is. So the application is currently disabled, will be back soon, right? Okay. The third set of things that we developed as Issue Tracker is a set of PowerShell commandlets that allows you to automate all of this as well in your scripts. So we have a set of PowerShell commands that allow you to disable the app, enable the app, verify the status, change the claim mapping, everything that can be done from a management console or can be done from System Center can also be done through scripting. So John, from Super Cloud Software, made a decision of exposing his application not just with a management API, expecting from somebody to create an app or a management app on top of that, but also created the three common experiences that people are used to. Scripting, like this, PowerShell scripting, management consoles, and System Center. In the real world, you can imagine somebody like Super Cloud Software creating, say, the equivalent of the management pack for, say, something like Tivoli or something like a, Unicenter or something like that, right? Okay. Let me bring the system back because I need it. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to enable. There we go. Please enable my app. Or maybe I can do it from here. Let's see. Maybe not. run it from here. Okay, should be back in a second. So let's recap on what we have done. So what we have is a management API or an issue tracker that it's surfaced not just as an API, but it's surfaced with, as I said, the three things, commandlets, etc. Now, one word about this, two things which are worth noting about this, is that, first of all, this is code, right? So what's happening in the API, it's a standard web service. We're not doing anything strange there. So you can build your own tools if you want it. So if you're not using System Center and you rather use the raw API, you can do that. The other thing that you probably noticed is that there was no username and passwords either for management. Right. All this is because the same management API is protected with the same approach that we used before. So we are using the same claim-based identity federation for enabling communication between the tools and enabling the management API. So it's completely seamless. It works as if you were in the same data center. And actually, if I go back, let me show you that. You will see that, right? So there is a specific mapping there. Let me show you there. IT pros at Massive Enterprise. Anybody belonging to the IT pro group in Massive Enterprise, then it's translated into the claims that are needed to call into those management APIs, making it very regular, very simple, and always the same. All right. I think we have plenty of time. So the last piece is about application integration. And this is remember the dialogue of the CIO with a requirement of feeding information from one side into the other. And this is actually not very new. As I think GP mentioned as well in his session, this is what's happening in the companies like very big corp for ages, right? It's been doing this all the time. And it's integration at different levels, UI, data integration, process integration. Okay? What is different in the services world as opposed to the on-premises world? Well, I think that it can be summarized in one sentence, which is, if your app is well architected, well, it follows service-oriented architecture principles, you're in a pretty good shape. So, for example, you've seen that Issue Tracker has two ways of exposing itself. It has a website and has an API, web service API that I'm using for the smart client. Now, nobody is forcing me to use that smart client. I can just plug and call those web services programmatically from whatever is important to call it. Right? So that's good. It's very good that I have these two experiences. It would be bad if Issue Tracker only gave me a website experience, a browser experience. Why? Because then if I wanted to do that, something from, say, a backend process or my ESB or whatever integration infrastructure I have, then I will have to do those crazy things like screen scrapping on a browser, which is not very good. So having an API is good. But what is also very different is that workarounds are more difficult in this world, in the world of services. Why? What I mean by workarounds? Workarounds are a nicer, more politically correct word than cheats. And I've done many of those. When you're running software on premises, you can cheat. You can treat the box that it's supposedly a black box, say it's any an ERP package or whatever. You can treat it as a black box, but you can also go and read the database. Right now, it's preventing to do that because you have access to it. So you can go and install triggers on the tables, so when you're notified when things change in the table. You can go and just suck all the database from your application and copy it somewhere else. Nobody's preventing you to do that. You can do even more creative things. You can go and install, say, an HTTP module on IIS, on ASP.NET, and sniff everything that's happening between the world and the application itself. Now, by using these techniques, you can achieve integration in very effective ways. The problem with services is that you don't have access to the servers that where you can do that. So you cannot do that, right? So having an API is good. Now, most of these APIs are APIs more of the the ask-tell in an ask-tell mode. So it's even if Issue Tracker gave you an API to create an issue, to query for issues and stuff, you need to proactively go and ask and tell Issue Tracker to do things for you, right? Issue Tracker will not proactively call you back. So I thought about creating another scenario, a more interesting scenario where, let's say you have Frank, a very big corp, and then with the the mainframes, the existing on-premises systems that very big corp has, probably with its own integration infrastructure there, right, that it's used to deal with integration within the company. And then we have Issue Tracker, and let's say we are using Issue Tracker. So when something is done by Frank, instead of going from the integration infrastructure to Issue Tracker to get all those changes, right, what we're thinking about doing is to actually change Issue Tracker architecture to be proactive about that. So create an event that is triggered from Issue Tracker, and then that event being routed somehow to an endpoint which lives in very big corp integration infrastructure, right? So that's what we wanted to do. Now this has a few challenges in itself, right? One challenge, of course, is that you need that endpoint to be public, because if it's not public, well, you don't reach it. And that's always, a challenge. So what we've done in our last demo is to actually take advantage of the service bus that allows us to kind of project virtual endpoints in a secure way using the same security artifacts that we've been looking at, because obviously service bus is very closely related to access control, and then instruct Issue Tracker whenever we want that event to be routed to our ESB, right? So what we want is to tell Issue Tracker, configure Issue Tracker with our management APIs to say, anytime somebody creates an issue, please route this issue to this endpoint. And that endpoint will be, serviced by the service bus. And then, that will be routed into the ESB. The ESB will treat that event in whatever ways it seems appropriate. So let's jump to the last demo, or the last set of demos. And let me go to this machine. And, well, we talked about an AS400, didn't we? So let's use one. Hey, it's a green screen.
Wow.
It's a real green screen.
Is that really WPM?
Yeah, look at that. Alpha rendering. And that's so this is an AS400 running somewhere in our network. And what I will do is actually also, run the integration infrastructure. So I have here my little project that allows me to do that. So let me run the ESB. It's one IXI, my ESB. Come on, you can do it. Yes. So now we have this guy listening, virtually listening, inside the corporation for events that will be triggered from Issue Tracker, right? So let me bring this down, leave the screen over there. And on the other side, so now that Issue Tracker is back enabled, I am going to do a few things. Let me just resize this and close the management console. Yes, thank you very much. Bye-bye. Let's bring back Mary. Mary is like another user in the company. Let's see if it's available, this again. Yes, so I can get issues. Let's see if I can get some projects. I'm not authorized. I think Mary is a tester, so that's all she can do. But now, let me open the management console again. Yes, and you've noticed that in the management console, they have two nodes, right? Was a group that allowed me to map claims between my Active Directory and issue trackers. And there was another node with events. There you go, event subscription. So what I will do is I go to the event subscriptions node, come on, and say I have 3 events. Issue created, issue closed, issue updated. I'm going to click on issue created. Apply the change. So I'm the IT guy saying, yes, please route these events to me. No, thank you very much. Bye-bye. Create a new issue. And say, so now I'm Mary, creating an issue with a smart client to issue tracker, the service, hosted somewhere there, right? Using the identity federation and claims to secure this call. And now say, well, hello. Yes. Create an issue. Create it. So let's see if it worked. So I have this little program here in the AS400 that I tweaked. Yeah, all this white hair is not in vain, right? There you go. We have a message. So if I... Thank you. Hello again. Create an issue. Now, of course, the AS400 requires an intro to refresh the screen. So there it goes again. So all those messages are flowing, secured, using the service bus in the middle, completely different networks, and it works. Now, more interestingly, the service bus has many different bindings available. So the one that we're using, which comes very handy for events, it's a multicast binding. So what it means is that you can have multiple listeners to that same event, which is essentially a one-way, it's a one-way operation, right? I'm sending events, and I'm not expecting anything in return, just sending that event, route it to the destination. So what I can do in the company is to actually take advantage of that capability and have multiple listeners to the same event if that's interesting for me, right? So what I will do is I have another little project here, which is a listener precisely to the same endpoint. I want to run it. And there it is. So we have our friend here. Let's wait for it to connect. Yes, there it is. And ask Mary to send another one. There it is. So I have the real-time notification on the second listener. And if I refresh our friend, that's again routed there, right? So let's go here now. Let me just kill this. Thank you. So bring it down, and just a quick overview of kind of the technologies that we are using for this. So this is the listener. This is my ESB. Let me kill this too. So first of all, I'm just grabbing some information that I need, authentication information. Then I'm setting up that. I say I want connectivity, HTTP, outbound connectivity. So in practice, what this means is that massive enterprise does not need to open anything, any port, anything from from within their boundaries. Using this binding, all connections are outbound. So everybody is actually connecting to the service bus, right? So there's no need to do anything special on your firewalls or anything like that. So I do that, a bunch of housekeeping stuff, there, this part. And then finally is the kind of the endpoint URL where I'm listening for those events, right? And has a predefined format what I'm using, which is, service bus URL, the service is the issue tracker, and the number 2 there represents the tenant. So this will be, massive enterprise, very big corp. Of course, events are also multi-tenant, so I can just listen to the ones that I'm interested in. And that's it. Now, obviously, this does nothing, but the program that does all the work is the endpoint, is the service itself. So now what I'm doing, that's issue created, that's the operation that I'm publishing through the service bus. And I'm grabbing an AS400 data queue, for those of you that remember that. And then I'm just listening for the event, transforming that into simple text, and putting the message into the AS400 data queue there, right? That's the last queue put, and the issue itself. Now it's all typed, nice, and easy to deal with. Okay. Okay, so let me see. So key messages. Obviously, everything that we discussed so far is all about integration on all these different aspects. Services that don't want to live in the periphery of a company, and there are important pieces, will not live in isolation, right? They will live in the context of something else, and therefore integration is a plus. So if you're an ISV, if you're like John, the founder and CEO of SuperCloud Software, you don't have excuses right now to give to anyone to reject your service, because there's ways of addressing this in very interesting ways, as I hope I showed you, right? So there's better tools, there are more tools. Things are much easier than they were before. Or believe me, I've done it. And if you're a very big corp, two things can happen. One is that you say, no, until you don't do this, I will not do it. But then, you might also settle for suboptimal solutions, right? The VP of marketing might be a very big guy, in power, say, I want issue tracker anyway. Even if it doesn't have single sign, I don't care, I want it anyway. And he might push too far as to get away with it, right? Well, and then you end up with a mess in the company. A problem, it's costly, it's difficult to deal with, to troubleshoot, to manage. It's a liability for the company from a security perspective, and all of that. So you can push for those solutions to be applied because the bar has, again, been lowered. So in the analogy, the transportation analogy that GP was using, all these things are like the containerization process, right? So having access to identity federation, having access to claims and claim-based authorization that allows you to scale, and that all of that is equivalent of containers in the transportation industry. So now it's more efficient for you to think about moving things around, because then the cost of moving things around can be addressed in a very, in a good way, an efficient way, and therefore take advantage of the promise of services. These are kind of some of the technologies that we've seen, mainly on the left side. Obviously, issue tracker itself is all built behind on top of SQL data services and a few other things that we haven't focused in this session. So we did that, we did this, and the last session, which is happening after this, it's the fun session that GP will be leading. Okay, so with that, I think we are in fairly good time. Thank you very much, and of course, Please fill the evals, etc. And we have, of course, questions. So please use your microphone so anybody can benefit from that. Yes, sir.
So is this sample code available?
The sample will be available. We haven't obviously noticed that there's a few things that need to be polished. So we are going to polish those and make them available for everybody to use. Yes.
Eugenio, one question here.
Oh, yes.
During the demo, you kind of showed the management tools, which I'm assuming tap into some APIs which we haven't seen during the course of the session so far. How did you create those MMC snap-ins? Because I'm assuming that your Cloudy service is actually provisioning a separate application instance for each customer who signs up. Am I right? It's not a multi-tenant application.
No, so Issue Tracker has two set of services. Okay. They have the functional services, which are the create issue, get all issues, get projects, everything you see in there. And then they have the management API, which is a separate service, potentially different servers, potentially different, completely separated one from the other, that deal with the specifics of management. Now that's all, custom code. Frankly, there's nothing there special. There is to enable the app. There is a enable app operation in a service. To disable the app, there is a void disable app void, and that's it. And then what we did build, it's an infrastructure piece that obviously plugs into the WCF and ASP.NET pipelines that do something with it. So whenever you send a request to say get all issues or create an issue, first we check, is the application enabled? Do you want me to send an event? Okay. Do you want me to whatever? All of that is a cross-cutting concern that is, of course, is not in the code of the functional code. It's part of the infrastructure pipeline. So we are keeping those two services separated from each other, but they're related by the underlying infrastructure and of course, and whatever data and state that needs to be kept for it to work. Okay. Right? Good. Yes, sir.
My question's about security integration. Let's say I'm the CIO of a very big corp. I don't use Active Directory in my enterprise. I use a security solution from IBM or Computer Associates or someone.
Yeah.
I'm not being resistant. There's a half a dozen nice services running on the Microsoft Cloud that all use the Microsoft Cloud's access control. So what I'm looking for is not integration between the Microsoft access control and my security from each individual service vendor, each cloudy, super cloudy. I'm looking for one that's been done jointly by Microsoft and IBM that they both stand behind. Are you partnering to do such a thing?
Well, this is based on standards. I think it was said 20 million times through all the sessions, but this is not dependent on any Microsoft technology on either side, right? So actually, if you download the SDK from Access Control, you will see samples which are written in completely different environments which are not Microsoft. Actually, Vittorio Bertocci's session showed integration of these same things with one product from IBM that I can't remember right now and actually working. So a couple of words on that. Yes, obviously, this sample is built all with Microsoft technologies except for the AS400, but that's another topic. It's not necessarily around security. Couple of things. So the STS that is running on the company to verify the claims that you're sending to access control, as I am Frank at Very Big Corp, or I'm a PM. You saw it's custom code.
Well, I, as a CIO of Very Big Corp, I would say I don't write STSs. That's not what.
Right.
That's why does. I expect to get that from IBM or
correct,
Microsoft
yes.
or so on.
So I mentioned that you can use, instead of writing your own STS, you can deploy a solution from anybody else. As long as it is compliant with WS Trust, it works, right? So that's one thing. Second thing, you can deploy an STS, not build an STS. Deploy an STS if you're comfortable with, say, Microsoft technology. You can deploy an STS pre-built for you, which is the Geneva server, right? Or you will be able, not right now. But when it's done, it's something that augments Active Directory to turn it into an STS instead of just Active Directory, right? What we've done, it's a very simple 10 lines of code, STS, just for us to demonstrate. But there's no need to tie anything to things like, say, Active Directory. There's no need for that. We're just using that for convenience. Make sense? Any other questions?
So maybe GP could answer this question too. In all this talk today, I really haven't heard anything about scale testing, perf testing, or testing part of the life cycle at all. Mm-hmm. And of course, it is a critical component of software development life cycle.
Right.
So any thoughts, comments?
Well, there's a few things that you can, there are hints around life cycle that you can see in some of our presentations. So one thing is that if you've seen remember when GP was showing the voting system, that he wanted to shut down it, and he shut it down from the portal. Maybe you've noticed that the portal had two environments. There was a staging environment, there was a production environment. So at least you have these two places, right? One is live, the other one is not live. You can switch, you can move from one to the other. You can imagine a much more complex service as this moves forward, where you can have a much, not just two. You can have 27 environments. You can have the ones that you define. You might have like a pre-production, beta, quality control, performance, and production, and then define rules to move your applications from one to the other. We have a few prototypes also that describe and show how that would work. So there is definitely, I agree with you that the application lifecycle and how these things make your life easier or more difficult is very important, right? So, for example, another hint, which is also related to lifecycle management, is the fact that, well, if you have to develop your app always connected to the services, it might be a problem, because you might be in a part of the world where you don't have network, for instance. Your developers might be flying on an airplane and they're still working on something. You might be using, say, agile practices with frequent, unit test everything, and imagine that you are paying for a transaction, even if you're developing. Every time you run a unit test, you hit some of a cloud service, you might be charged for that. So in situations where you have that, it might be interesting to have like an offline experience for development. So you are, isolated in your own world, and then you interact with the cloud when you need it. So, and there's also hints of that already in our offerings. So you see that, for example, the whole development in Azure is it can be done offline, and you publish it to staging when you're done. So then you have storage, and you have the compute node running on your laptop. In our case, obviously the network dependency, it's a big dependency, right? Like here, it's some things were slow, some things didn't work, and I had that. Well, that's the reality. This is all live. It was working, and something went wrong. But we used, you can still use, good practices still apply. So separation, mocking, stubbing, and then replacing a real component with a mock component, are probably even more important in this world.
I have one more question if you have time.
Sure.
This has to do with diagnostics. In our normal development process, we write information to event log, which is monitored by whatever monitoring tools to gather the data. So would we do the same thing in the Azure platform? And in the example you gave, or the events being propagated from Azure into the monitoring console, is that event-driven, or is it more of a polling mechanism?
So there's a mixture of those two. But one comment on that. So for troubleshooting and say management, yeah, we are used to say log on the event log of the machine. There's a problem, an exception, or something, and then we log that, and then we look at those logs. Now we need to be very careful of what are the things that, as a company, we're interested in consuming from that perspective, because quite frankly, as very big corp, I'm not interested in, say, the memory footprint of issue tracker, because that's what I'm buying. I'm buying not having to worry about server things. If you're running out of disk, who cares? That's not my problem. It's your problem. Now, what I do care, and that's one of the things that I try to elevate in my presentation, was that when we were measuring performance, the performance of the things that we were measuring were like more business things, right? How much time does it take to create an issue? Because those are the things that I really care about the service. So it's a balance, you can imagine, say, building a bridge using the same technologies that I showed, pushing events, the event log. Let's say issue tracker creates a log using, say, log4net. They write a sync for log4net that pushes those to the service bus to the company. Most probably a lot of those events will have to do with technical stuff that not necessarily very big corp is interested in. Right?
So where should I log them? So I understand that. So as an application developer, do I still log things that is of concern to me in the event log? Or is there...
So what I didn't show here is issue tracker or SuperCloud software own management, right? Because there's three different players here. I am very big corp and I consume the service. And I want to manage it, but with one level of management, which is enabling, disabling, give me more resources, buying more things from issue tracker, knowing when issue tracker goes down so I can do something. Once I have it in System Center, things like that, if I cannot get or performance goes up, I can then say, how is my firewall doing? Maybe it's correlate things which are issue tracker not necessarily knows. That's one thing. Then you have the place where issue tracker is running, right? Which can be Azure or can be something else, right? That has its own management and its own operations in itself. And then you have issue tracker that might be self-hosting, for example, that they are interested in a different management perspective, because they might be interested in, say, classifying different tenants depending on their size, on their importance, on their payment, on the SLA that they agreed on. Maybe very big corp bought the, say, gold subscription, and massive enterprise bought the silver subscription, and they want to provide different. So how do they do that? Well, they will have their own management tools to do that. Truth be told, if you're hosting on things like Azure today, well, not everything is completely done yet in that aspect. But obviously, it will happen in one way or the other because it's needed.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much.